Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Kris, still. This was a donated request from Mohamed. He asked for The Century, America's Time, the beginning, Seeds of Change. I forgot in the last video, but this is from a different channel I've never done before, McDonald Technology Services. So, we just heard about the 13 million people that came to America from 1900 to, you know. So let's get into the video.
I crossed the ocean. I never saw such waves in my life. I never knew an ocean existed. Approaching the New York Harbor, the Statue of Liberty was there, and it gave me a free feeling of liberty, a feeling of a new nation, a feeling of a new hope for a beautiful life.
There's something wonderful about being an immigrant. There's something so deliciously naive and happy about being an immigrant who has escaped from something. My father would say from time to time, no matter how bad things were, at least we're free.
In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, it was said prosperity was measured by the thickness of the soot in the air.
Oh man, whatever them furnaces let loose, the whole sky was full of red dust. Full of red dust. If you had your wash out, you had your laundry out, it was too bad. You had to run outside and pull that laundry in because it'd be covered in red dust. You would see them coal mines lit up from Greensburg all the way to Uniontown. It was wonderful to see it.
Relentless production in Pittsburgh's steel mills, foundries, and coal mines attracted an enormous number of immigrants and poor whites and blacks from the rural South. It was their labor which fed the furnace of industrial America.
You had to pick everything up. You had to move everything by hand. No lunch breaks of any kind. You worked and you had a sandwich in your hand. If you had to go to the restroom, boom, back right away. They timed you. Well, you get home at night, you couldn't lift your arms up. I remember this. Oh, I remember this distinctly. My father would come home and he'd say to my mother, rub my arms a little bit, because they were picking up. There was no, it was all mule work.
I had two uncles that worked in the mill. It was dangerous. No safety precautions were in the mills. You could walk in the mill and see people with one arm, one leg. You had an accident in the mills almost every 2 days, but nobody did anything about it.
There was no compensation for the injuries and death on the job, and it was almost impossible for workers in the early part of the century to organize.
They tried to start a union, and of course they had the coal and iron police, they were called in those days. And they would bust a lot of heads, and a lot of murders were committed, and a lot of things that you daresn't say too much. If you worked in a mill, if your boss said something to you, that was it, that was the law.
Industrial work involved 6 days a week, 12 to 16 hours a day. The daily wage, barely $2. Children, too, were made to work, 2 million of them across America, some as young as 4.
They did not complain as adults tended to do. Employers liked to think of them as happy elves.
E.L. Doctorow wrote about child labor in his novel of life in the early century, Ragtime.
They were more agile than adults, but they tended in the latter hours of the day to lose a degree of efficiency. In the canneries and mills, these were the hours they were most likely to lose their fingers or have their hands mangled or their legs crushed. In the mines, they worked as sorters of coal and sometimes were smothered in the coal chutes.
As a child, in the early part of the century, Pauline Newman worked 13-hour days in a New York garment sweatshop, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory.
We had a corner
The Triangle Shirtwaist? What a name.
on the floor that resembled a kindergarten. You were not allowed to sing. We weren't allowed to talk to each other. The door was locked to keep us in.
The locked doors would prove to be fatal. On March the 25th, 1911, fire broke out at the factory with an exit door locked on the 9th floor. Many workers jumped to their death.
Wow. Was this the garment?
I was 11. And I remember all of a sudden all of East New York went crazy.
Yeah, okay. This is the garment factory fire. I vaguely know a little bit about this, not much at all, I should say.
Because the kids were running around with the newspapers hollering extra that all these people had died in that fire.
Wow. 146 workers died.
You're in that situation. You're on the 6th floor of a building. Fire's breaking out underneath you. Just nothing but smoke and everything like that. That's going to be what kills you. Smoke inhalation. And then the fire is going to take care of your body. There's also a chance if it's a wooden building, the structure could collapse and you die that way. Do you jump? Oh. I mean, when the answer is, you're going to die, you're going to die, you're going to die, do you decide which way? You know, going out on your terms? That's a tough one. I would always think, well, maybe I can jump into a tree nearby. Yeah, that's a tough one.
There were no sprinklers inside the factory then. There had never been a fire drill. The tragedy outraged a public that had become increasingly aware of both the underside of a prosperous nation and the need for reform.
The great reform movement of this period is called progressivism. It's a belief in progress. It's a belief that we can make things better, that you can have a more just, more democratic society.
At the vanguard of social reform in this particular period were progressive women concerned about their own inferior status.
When I was a girl, a woman didn't have rights to custody of their children. They didn't have the right to own property. A woman teacher didn't have the right to marry. She didn't have a right to live alone. She had to board with a family. And if she started dating, or she went out at night, she was fired.
For progressives such as Frances Garrison Villard, suffrage, the vote for women, was the key to emancipation.
Grandmother was a very strong militant suffragette. As a boy,
I just kind of want to counter this. One of the things, they talk about the right to vote. The right to vote was kind of, I don't want to say kind of always there, but the ability for women to vote was kind of there. Now you got to hear me out on this. A lot of the voting was tied to owning property and was tied to your ability to fight a war. So if you were a man and you owned property, you could vote. If you were a man and you were of fighting age, you could vote. That was something that women didn't, back in those days, in the older days, women weren't going to do that. Now, you have to understand that in America, women got the right to vote without having to sign up for selective services. When you're 18 as a U.S. male, selective services comes in the mail, you fill it out, you send it back. If you don't do that, you go to jail, you get a penalty, a fine, and you lose your right to vote forever. Women don't have to do that, so, you know, terrible for them. But it's kind of one of those things where if it was tied to voting today, or tied to fighting a war, you could vote, but you're going to war. I wonder how many people, men and women, would still be willing to do that. Because owning property anymore isn't like it was back in the 1700s. So I wonder if it was tied to something like that, how many people would be willing to do it? I bet it'd be different.
I was more inclined to laugh at them and dismiss them. I didn't see any reason why they should have a vote. I would say I believe that it's still a man's world, and it would continue so for some time to come.
Some suffragettes were mounting a violent campaign. In Britain, one of them was willing to die for the cause. In June of 1913, Emily Davison threw herself in front of the King's horse at the popular Epsom Derby. She died with the inscription, "Votes for Women," sewn into her coat. That kind of sacrifice inspired American suffragettes to intensify their campaign. The right to vote would also prove elusive for America's 9 million blacks. Black men could vote in theory, but in fact most were barred by white intimidation, poll taxes, and literacy tests.
Literacy tests. Things that they aren't giving to the white people. I'm not here to shame white people in the past. I mean, look, America has its history. And we can look back on it now and just say it's just stupid and shameful. But I also want to say this. The world was different back then. Not saying we were better at all. Civil War ended in 1865, and up until the 1950s, 100 years, the South was still trying to, the black population in the South, the black population was still dealing with issues. And just, by the way, this is a little tangent. When I talk about having conversations with people, and sometimes I'll just give them a little southern accent, I am not in any way trying to like vilify the South. In fact, I don't think I've ever come across a southern person, like in person, and have them ever gotten mad at me. So when I do the voice, oh sugar, oh sweetie, you want another refill on that sweet tea? It's out of affection, because it just, when you hear that, you're just like, okay. You sit down at a restaurant and they come walking up, they're like, sweetie, what would you like to drink? You want some sweet tea? And you're just like, it's too much sugar, but I appreciate it. Now from the north, hey sweetie, do you want some of that sweet tea? Whoa. What's with the anger? It's a little bit of hostility there, bud. It's alright. Sugar, we got some of them great food. You just go and browse on through the menu, do what you want. We got some great food. Why don't you browse it? Why don't you just take it easy, pal? I don't know what the attitude's about. Why are you yelling at me? We just met. This is going to go definitely against you on the tip. It's just a different, it's just a different way. I just want to tell a quick little story because I was going to tell it. I went to James K. Polk's house in Tennessee in February of 19, and then from there went to the Shiloh battlefield. Excuse me. And then from there I went to Chattanooga, stayed overnight because I went into northern Georgia the next day to the Chickamauga battlefield. And afterwards, it was lunchtime, and I decided I could start driving home, or right nearby was a restaurant you find more in the South called Charlie's. It's Charlie's. I love it. Louisiana sirloin. I love it. So I was like, well, Charlie's wins. So I went there. Elderly woman in the front takes me in, gives me the menu, sits me down. My waitress comes up, asks me for my drink order. I go everywhere with a book. So I'll just give my order and I just read. And I open up my menu and it's got the plastic cover on the menu. Menu's paper, but there's plastic cover to protect it. And I open it up and there was like ranch dressing inside, and somebody had closed it, and so it smudged it all in there. So I opened it up and I saw it, and I said to my waitress, can I get another menu? And she's like, oh my gosh, yeah, sorry. All she has to do is take it in the back, wipe it off, right? Done. She brings me another menu. She's like, I'll give you a cup more mint, sweetie. I was like, you don't have to, I know what I'm getting. Give her my order. So she brings out some bread and stuff like that. She goes, I gotta ask where you're from. And I was like, from Peoria, Illinois. And she goes, you know, your accent down here, you stand out like a sore thumb. And I was like, yeah, everyone down here stands out like a sore thumb. So yeah, I'm sure. Really nice. 8 left, paid. 8 paid, left. That's the order. And as I'm walking out, that woman was by the front. She was kind of like the person who, how many, and then she sets up your table. And I'm walking up. Big old fly just flew by. So I'm walking out and she sees me and she fast walks over to me. And as I'm walking, she does this thing where she like links her arm around mine. So we're like walking hand in hand, or arm in arm, interlinked, like we were married couples, like my arm's like that and her arm was up through here. And she goes, she's got her hands like that on my hand, underneath and on top. And she's rubbing them, and she was so nice. She goes, I am so sorry. I gave you a menu. It had ranch dressing in it. Now, I did not do that on purpose because you was from the north. That's not at all what I did, sweetie. I am so sorry. Please accept my apology. And I was like, you don't have anything to apologize about. Don't worry about it. And she's like, no, you need to accept my apology. And I was like, fine, I accept it, but it wasn't you who did it. I accept your apology on behalf of the kid who probably did it and the parent who was just like, I don't care. Closed the menu, gave it away. Like, you did nothing. And she kept saying she was so sorry. And I looked at her and I said, if this is the worst thing that happens to me today, then it was a really good day. And if this is the best thing that happens to me today, then I will be thankful that this happened to me, because it would be, ha-ha, yeah, and then this happened, ha-ha, the bright spot. So I was like, really, just don't worry about it. She wouldn't let me leave, though, until I accepted her apology. And then when I did, she was like, bless you, sweetie, so nice. You have a good trip, honey. And I left. She was just so nice. But anyways, a couple people have said something. And I just wanted to know that, like, no, when I do that, it really is out of affection, because every time I've went somewhere, and it's always in the South, they're just so nice. And it makes me laugh, because if I hear that same thing, just that same Southern hospitality tone, but just in the plain Northern way, I would just look at them and like, ugh, don't call me sweetie, you don't even know who I am. You just get me my soda and the bread, and then you skedaddle. I'll wave you over. With that tone. Then you hear it from the South and you're like, oh, she's really nice. Okay. I'm sorry. I just had to say that. That was just, this kind of brought it up. So anyways, back to the video.
85% of black Americans lived in poverty in the southern United States, segregated from whites by so-called Jim Crow laws, laws upheld by the Supreme Court that all but wiped out the freedom and equality once promised by emancipation.
It is the complete denial of the American dream. They cannot go to the same schools with whites. They can't drink from the same drinking fountains. They cannot sit in the same part of a streetcar or in the same cars on a railroad. It's a horrible time. White politicians compete with each other in the South for being more, at least verbally, violent toward African Americans, and in many cases are encouraging or at least abetting actual violence.
They were lynching blacks for hardly a week. There's 2 or 3 blacks didn't get lynched or burned at the stake. I don't know whether you heard that or not. You ever hear of any black people being burned at the stake? Well, that's what happened. I lived in those days.
The most prominent black leader at the turn of the century, Booker
Was that Booker T. Washington? No.
T. Washington accepted the notion of separateness. He asked blacks to better themselves through work and vocational training. From whites, he asked for help, not equality.
Booker T. Washington was born a slave, called his autobiography Up From Slavery. This is a man who has pulled himself up by his own bootstraps. And he takes the perspective that it would be foolish to challenge what's being done to them too soon and too openly.
But there would be a challenge.
W.E.B. Du Bois. I'm calling it.
In 1905, the black intellectual W.E.B. Du Bois urged a new struggle for full political and social equality.
There's the Klan.
Entrenched resistance to such change would make civil rights, as Du Bois predicted, the major social issue in American life for the rest of the century. At the turn of the century, there were 76 million people in America. The majority of them lived on farms or in small towns, where they relied on gaslight and horsepower.
Every morning the milkman came, and the cream at the top would rise, and if you got there early, you could take a lick of the cream before your mother found out what you were doing.
It was the great period of the front porch. In the evenings after dinner, the family would assemble on the front streets. Sometimes the neighbors would pass and we exchanged bows. We played games, I Spy and Run Sheep Run, and Lemonade, What Was Your Trade?
Tennis rackets were hefty and the racket faces elliptical. Women were stouter then. They visited the fleet carrying white parasols. Everyone wore white in summer. That was the style. That was the way people lived.
And those hats.
But the rhythm of American life was quickening in the early years of the century as more and more people headed for the cities, for the bright lights and the myriad opportunities.
I was 4 years old when I came to Chicago. It was a real magical thing to see the streetcars moving up and down and the street filled with people all the time and great activities going on. And I recall looking at it with wonder.
The cities, New York City more than most, were centers for the latest engineering and technological marvels.
The skyscraper is born in that time, a completely new building form, a completely new idea that a city could grow up instead of out.
He's an author, does historical books, presidents and stuff like that. Trying to see I think he did John Adams, but don't quote me.
It's an amazing sight to me. I saw the Flatiron Building. I saw the Woolworth Tower. It's a very stunning view, how a building can pierce the sky.
And underground, there was a new way to travel. In New York City, the subway was inaugurated in 1904. One could ride the subway to the outskirts of the city, where the power of science and technology was harnessed for pursuit of a good time. Tens of thousands of New Yorkers went every day and night to Coney Island.
When I came there, my brothers immediately treated me to a hot dog, Nathan's. I dug right into the water. I tasted all over me the salt of the sea. I was baptized by nature. There was a kind of freedom that I never dreamt that I could have.
That sense of freedom was also spread by the availability of ideas. In the early part of the century, some 9,000 public libraries in the country dispensed information freely and democratically.
One man said to me, "Alfred, do you know that there's a library on 42nd Street?" I says, "I do, but I was never there." He says, "That's where you belong. You'll get all the literature in the world, and it doesn't cost you a dime." I read an immense number of books because I wanted to understand the American people's minds. I wanted to be completely American and forget all of my past.
I'm going to stop it here, and we will come back for the final video. But some things in between. I don't know if I have the thanks button back. I got demonetized. It came back. I had to verify everything. I did. Now I had to re-verify, and it was just a thing. So if it's there, you can donate to the channel. If you do donate, you can ask, give me a react. If you do, you could give me a video, and I will react to it. But you don't have to. You could just, whatever, say thank you, or here, take this, stupid. Much appreciated either way. One's hurtful, but you know, it's still appreciated. If you're watching these videos and you're not subscribed, subscribe. It's legal now. You have to do it. It's illegal to watch a video without being subscribed. Don't check my history though. And give a thumbs up. It's free. It's nice. Helps. Even if you don't like the video, give a thumbs up. If you want to give a thumbs down, YouTube and I, in partnership, are awarding people cruise ships. We're building this ship. It's called the Unsinkable. It's a little foreshadowing for what's about to come. So, we load a bunch of you up. Nice cruise ship, right? We take you out to the middle of nowhere. The furthest point away. And then we throw some chum out into the water. And you hear these little booms, right? And you're like, what's that? And then you remember, oh, you know what? When they were loading up all of our stuff, they were taking these little black kegs in there that had a skull and crossbones on them. And then they were lighting these things that were going... It's just like this long thing that went all the way down in there. I don't know what it was. So then there's some kablooies, and then it breaks in half just like the Titanic and sinks. So it's a free ride to the bottom of the ocean. You're welcome. And hopefully we'll be loading up thumbs downers soon. So just give it a thumbs up and save yourself the time. Because I gotta believe that with the chum in the water, Those sharks aren't going to be given rides anywhere. You can hitchhike if you want on the, you know, as you're going down, just throw up a thumb for a shark. I don't think it's going to work for you, but I'm okay with that. So we're getting the video here. Apparently this button doesn't work, but I'm going to try it anyways, and we'll see what happens. So end the video now. Have a good day, have a good night. Maybe? Why would it work? My old keyboard died, and the new keyboard doesn't like to do this, so I had to buy a new one. So until next time, bye bye.